Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. All right, first thing, we have matching funds for our fundraiser, which we started last week. So we're trying to raise $100,000. We've gotten about $15,000 so far. Now we got $40,000 in matching funds. So that means if you donate today, you could double your impact. It also means that we need to raise another $40,000 to secure these funds. So I know some people wait for the matching funds to give a donation. So now we have them. So if you watch this show, if you read antiwar.com, if you appreciate what we do and you have the means, please go to antiwar.com/donate to make a donation, a tax-deductible donation. We are a nonprofit. This is how we get by. We are 100% funded by our readers. Any amount is greatly appreciated. So again, antiwar.com/donate. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, the U.S. pressures Ukraine to lower the draft age to 18. So this is a really sickening story here. A Ukrainian official said Tuesday that American politicians are pressuring Ukraine to lower the minimum age of conscription from 25 to 18 to make more young men available for combat. So this is Serhiy Leshenko, who's an advisor to Zelensky's chief of staff. He wrote on Telegram, quote, "If this information has surfaced, I can confirm it. American politicians from both parties are putting pressure on Zelensky to explain why there is no mobilization of those aged 18 to 25 in Ukraine. The argument of our partners is that when the U.S. fought in Vietnam, people were drafted from the age of 19, end quote. And I know during Vietnam, they were drafting 18-year-olds. I think the age was between 18 and 26. So back in April, Zelensky signed a bill that lowered the minimum conscription age in Ukraine from 27 to 25. Leshenko said that Zelensky is resisting the pressure from the U.S. to start conscripting at 18. Leshenko said, quote, "That's why the Americans are hinting that Western weapons alone are not enough and that mobilization from the age of 18 is necessary. President Zelensky did not give in and continues to persuade politicians from both parties to provide weapons without changing the draft age," end quote. So it sounds like what he's saying is that the U.S. politicians are, Zelensky's asking for all these weapons for long-range strikes inside Russia, and they might be saying, well, you need the manpower. Why don't you lower the conscription age too? And I think, I've read a few, some people I've seen theorize why the conscription age was 27 and now is 25, why they avoided forcibly conscripting the younger Ukrainians is something like the thinking is by the time they're 27, they might have kids already. They might be leaving behind children if they are killed on the front lines instead of just completely wiping out a generation of young men, which, the war has done that already to some extent. But the U.S. war machine, they just want to throw more Ukrainians into this meat grinder. And they, it just goes to show they don't care about the lives of Ukrainians at all. And I know one American politician has not been shy about his desire for Ukraine to lower the conscription age, and that is Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina. Right before Zelensky signed that law that lowered the age from 27 to 25, he was in Ukraine, and he called for younger Ukrainians to be sent to the front lines. He said, quote, "I would hope that those eligible to serve in the Ukrainian military would join. I can't believe it's at 27. You're in a fight for your life, so you should be serving, not at 25 or 27. We need more people in the line," end quote. So Graham said that, again, right before Zelensky signed that bill. And many people remember, I'm sure, that in the early days of the war back in 2022, Graham said that if we give Ukraine, all the weapons that it wants, they're going to be willing to fight to the last person, fight to the last Ukrainian. Again, they just don't care about all these Ukrainians being killed. They just want to keep fueling this proxy war, see more Russians get killed, Keep making money. That's what it's all about here. All right, so the next one here, to boost Ukraine's army, feared patrols hunt for potential conscripts. This article is from Al Jazeera about these teams that are going around in Ukraine to conscript people. I mean, basically, they go around to public places. They'll grab someone, if they look military, like they're of military age, they will check their papers, essentially. They have like these QR codes on their phone or either papers that they have to carry around, and they're required to update their conscription information, or they could face penalties for that. And that is required of men from ages 18 to 60. And under Ukraine's martial law, if you're a man aged 18 to 60, you can't leave the country. They're also trying to pressure Ukrainians who have left the country they cut them off from consular services if they haven't registered for the draft and things like that. So this is just kind of a story about different accounts from some Ukrainians who have had who are trying to avoid these draft people going around trying to draft them. One of them they speak to is a 34-year-old. They don't use their real names here, who is very close to the front lines in the east. His name is Volodymyr, and he refuses to leave the eastern Ukrainian town, even though he's very close to the fighting. It's just 6 miles away, because he says he's going to be herded back home, that he'll be sent back with a gun in his hands, basically saying he's afraid to leave, to go west, because he knows that they're going to grab him. He's 34, and they're going to send him into the military to go fight. And he says way too many guys that he knows have been killed, wounded, or incapacitated since 2014. So, there's a lot of stories like this. There's some instances of violence here. There's also been multiple reports of violence toward potential conscripts. In late May, Serhiy Kovalchuk, a 32-year-old man, was beaten in a conscription office in the central city of Zhytomyr and died in hospital 6 days later. He suffered a head trauma during an epileptic fit after several days. So this is what the Ukrainian officials claim, that he suffered a head trauma after several days of heavy drinking. They're claiming he was drunk and fell down or something, but his family says he was beaten and killed. And there's been other I've seen videos of them grabbing people, like dragging them off. So, if you're a fighting age male in Ukraine and you don't want to fight, it's not a very pleasant time. It's good to avoid public spaces. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills 55 more Palestinians in Gaza. So Gaza's health ministry said Tuesday that Israeli forces killed at least 55 Palestinians and injured 329 over the previous 24-hour period, bringing its death toll since last October to 42,344, and the number of wounded to 99,013. So that's approaching 100,000, the number of wounded. And these are people who arrive in hospitals. You have to imagine, if you're in Gaza, considering the horror show that hospitals are, just completely overcrowded and barely functioning. If you're injured and it's not life-threatening, I think there's a good chance that you don't even go to the hospital. So that number is probably much higher. And then we know that the dead is there's also people buried under the rubble and missing. So Israel continues to escalate attacks on northern Gaza, tightening its siege on the Jabalia refugee camp. According to Reuters, at least 17 Palestinians were killed by Israeli fire near Al-Fallujah in Jabalia. Israeli strikes destroyed 3 houses in a suburb of Gaza City, and at least 2 bodies were recovered, but rescuers were searching for 12 missing people. Israeli strikes also hit areas of central and southern Gaza. In the southern city of Khan Yunis, an Israeli missile struck a house, killing 10 members of the same family who were inside. You see a picture here from the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, some of the family mourning their dead relatives. So Oxfam and 37 other humanitarian organizations published a joint statement warning that the Israeli assault on Gaza has reached a horrifying level of atrocity, saying that the situation in the north is catastrophic. The statement said, quote, "Northern Gaza is being wiped off the map under the guise of evacuation. Israeli forces have ordered the forced displacement of an estimated 400,000 Palestinians trapped in northern Gaza, including Gaza City. This is not an evacuation. This is forced displacement under gunfire. Since October 1st, no food has been allowed into the area, and civilians are being starved and bombed in their homes and their tents," end quote. So Israeli media has reported that Israel is carrying down a scaled-down version of the general's plan, which would result in the complete ethnic cleansing of northern Gaza and the extermination of anyone who stayed behind. So the next one here, the U.S. gives Israel until after the election to ease the starving of Palestinians. So this was the big news on Tuesday, that the Biden administration sent this big letter to Israel, giving them 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza, or else, not really clear what the or else is there. There's not a clear consequence based on this letter, but essentially this is so clearly just an effort to get Kamala Harris some votes from people that might not vote for her for supporting this genocidal slaughter in Gaza and basically promising to continue supporting it if she's elected. This is just, I think, just a total election stunt. So this letter, it was written by Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. It was sent to Israeli officials on Sunday, and it gave Israel 30 days to allow more aid deliveries into Gaza and take other steps to improve humanitarian conditions. So 30 days, that's a nice cushion. It's about 10 days after the election on November 5th. So by then, who knows what the situation is going to be. The letter says that a failure to implement these measures may have implications for U.S. policy and relevant U.S. laws, referring to foreign assistance laws that prohibit U.S. military aid to countries blocking aid delivery. U.S. government agencies had previously concluded that Israel was, in fact, deliberately blocking aid, but Blinken overrode those concerns to ensure that U.S. weapons continue to flow to Israel. So the letter kind of hints that Israel's failure to take these steps could impact military aid. It does not threaten to cut off weapon shipments. You see a lot of headlines saying that that's what the U.S. is threatening to do, but it's not explicit in the letter. And then State Department spokesman Matt Miller, he was kind of pressed by journalists on Tuesday, what will be the consequences for Israel if they don't fulfill these things? And he wouldn't say. So not a very serious warning here. And this letter comes 2 weeks after Israel cut off all aid deliveries to northern Gaza and ordered the estimated 300,000 and 400,000 Palestinians in the area to evacuate to the south. And I mentioned again that they're carrying out this general's plan. But the thing is, even before Israel began implementing this plan, aid deliveries into Gaza reached an all-time low. This letter says, quote, "The amount of assistance entering Gaza in September was the lowest of any month during the past year," end quote. The letter calls for Israel to allow 350 aid trucks to enter Gaza on a daily basis, enact humanitarian pauses to allow for the distribution of aid, and allow the over 1 million Palestinians taking refuge at the Al-Mawasi camp on the coast to move inland before the winter. So in an apparent response to the letter, Israel said on Monday that it allowed 30 aid trucks to enter northern Gaza, but Gaza's government media office denied that the trucks came in, calling the Israeli claim lies. So, I mean, look what they're doing here. 30 days, considering the situation in North Gaza, a lot of people can be killed and starved in 30 days. And they're not even asking them to stop the killing part, through military action. They're just saying you got to let more aid in, essentially. And of course, the Biden administration, I mean, again, this goes to after the election, November 14th, about if Kamala loses, a lame duck Biden administration. I mean, I guess Biden's going to be a lame duck either way, but, if Kamala wins, it'll be different. If Harris wins, it'll be different. But, if Trump wins, Biden is not going to be able to fundamentally change the U.S. relationship with Israel in a few months. So this whole thing is just a complete joke. And if she wins, of course, I'm sure they're going to decide, oh, you know what, we're happy with what Israel has done to mitigate this stuff, even if they didn't really do anything. They might do some symbolic things, kind of play these shell games that we've seen them play before. But this is just a total stunt, because look at what else the U.S. is doing. They just sent a missile battery to defend Israel. They're 100% supporting the attacks in Lebanon. They're vowing to help them and defend them from Iran, help them with the attack on Iran. So, this is not a sincere warning here from the Biden administration. It's very transparent. And I think by doing this, it's like they try to play both sides. They want to appeal to some people who might not vote for Harris because of Gaza. But then at the same time, you have Israel supporters who are going to be upset about this, so it's kind of a way that they try to play both sides. But at the end of the day, they're 100% behind Israel. All right, so the next one here, where am I? How Israel's army uses Palestinians as human shields in Gaza. This one is from the New York Times. So we've seen stories like this before. This one is a new story about Israel using Palestinians that they detain. In this one case that they talk about, a minor, a 17-year-old, and use them as human shields. Basically send them into the tunnels, send them into buildings that they think might be booby-trapped, or where there might be Hamas militants hiding. And they spoke with Mohammed Shuber, who was found hiding with his family in early March. Then Israeli soldiers detained him for roughly 10 days before releasing him without charge. During that time, Mr. Shuber said the soldiers used him as a human shield. He was 17 years old at the time and said that he was forced to walk handcuffed through the empty ruins of his hometown, Khan Yunis, in southern Gaza, searching for explosives set by Hamas. To avoid being blown up themselves, the soldiers made him go ahead. In one wrecked building, he stopped in his tracks. Running along the wall, he said, was a series of wires attached to explosives. He said, quote, "The soldiers sent me like a dog to a booby-trapped apartment. I thought these would be the last moments of my life," end quote. So an investigation by the New York Times found that Israeli soldiers and intelligence agents throughout the war in Gaza have regularly forced captured Palestinians to conduct life-threatening reconnaissance missions to avoid putting Israeli soldiers at risk on the battlefield. While the extent and scale of such operations are unknown, the practice has been used by at least 11 squads in 5 cities in Gaza, often with the involvement of officers from intelligence agencies. Palestinian detainees have been coerced to explore places in Gaza where the Israeli military believes that Hamas militants have prepared an ambush or a booby trap. The practice has gradually become more widespread since the start of the war last October. So the Times interviewed 7 Israeli soldiers who observed or participated in the practice and presented it as routine, commonplace, and organized, conducted with considerable logistical support and the knowledge of superiors on the battlefield. So they didn't just speak to Palestinians who were used as human shields, they also spoke to Israeli soldiers. Many of the soldiers said the detainees were handled and often transported between the squads by officers from Israel's intelligence agencies, a process that required coordination between battalions and the awareness of senior field commanders. The Times also spoke to 8 soldiers and officials briefed on the practice, who all spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss a military secret. So one person that went by name was Major General Tamir Hyman, a former chief of military intelligence who is routinely briefed by top military and defense officials on the conduct of the war, confirmed the use of one version of the practice, saying that some detainees had been coerced into entering tunnels while others had volunteered to accompany troops. I find that one hard to believe, that there's Palestinians eager to volunteer to accompany Israeli soldiers. And then 3 Palestinians gave on-the-record accounts about being used as human shields. So there's a lot more to this story. To hear more about it, if you want to go read the full thing, we have the archived version on antiwar.com to get past the paywall. All right, so the next one here, Israel wiped out a displaced family in northern Lebanon. So Israel's airstrike on a Christian-majority village in northern Lebanon wiped out an entire family that was displaced from southern Lebanon. So this was a strike that I talked about yesterday. The attack, which hit the village of Aitu on Monday, killed 23 people, including at least 12 women and 2 children. Local residents were shocked by the attack on the Christian area that's far from the Israeli border and far from the conflict zone in the south. The owner of the building, Eli Alwan, said that it was a massacre that happened in his home. Alwan said that he had known the family, who were Shiite Muslims, for 15 years. He said, quote, "They were a decent family. I welcomed them as friends," end quote. So Alwan also lives in the building, but he was not at home when the strike hit, but his mother was, and she was wounded in the attack. So the UN's Human Rights Office is calling for an investigation into the strike, with its spokesman saying that there's real concerns that the laws of war are not being followed, which, of course, it's Israel we're talking about here. But Israel claimed that it targeted a building owned by Hezbollah, but Alwan is not a member of Hezbollah. And you see this picture here of dead bodies lying near a statue of Saint Charbel, who is a Lebanese saint, Maronite saint. And again, it just shows, this is a Christian area, Christian majority area. Security sources told AFP that the strike was launched after a man in a car arrived at the building to visit the family. Alwan said that he blamed the man who showed up in the car. So it sounds like, based on that he might have been the target, but there's been no claims that this guy was a Hezbollah fighter or anything like that. And even if he was, there's no way he could pose a threat to Israel from this northern village. So there's no justification for this. There's been speculation that the strike was primarily a revenge attack against Lebanon in general after a Sunday drone strike by Hezbollah on an Israeli military base killed 4 soldiers and wounded scores of others. Israel might want it to show, look, we can get you anywhere. We can hit across Lebanon, and we don't care who we kill. Alwan's brother, Sarkis, who lives next door to the bombed building, he said that they would no longer take in families fleeing from the south. He said, quote, "We are Christians. Our religion teaches us tolerance, but now we have learned our lesson. We will no longer welcome anyone into the family home," end quote. So Israeli strikes have wiped out other families who fled southern Lebanon, following a similar pattern to Gaza, where Israel frequently bombs areas that it has deemed so-called safe zones. An Israeli strike on central Beirut last week killed a family of 8, including 3 children who fled from the south. So very similar things that we're seeing in Lebanon, echoes of Gaza in many ways. All right, so the next one here, Hezbollah vows strikes across Israel, calls for a ceasefire. Hezbollah deputy Sheikh Naim Qassem on Tuesday vowed that Hezbollah would strike targets across Israel in the face of Israeli attacks on Lebanon, but also called for a ceasefire, saying that it was the solution. He said, quote, "The solution is a ceasefire. We are not speaking from a position of weakness. If the Israelis did not want that, we will continue," end quote. And he suggested that Hezbollah would only agree to a ceasefire if there was also one in Gaza. He said, quote, "Lebanon cannot be separated from Palestine, nor can the region be separated from Palestine," end quote. Qassem said that Hezbollah would expand its strikes in Israel in response to Israel launching attacks across Lebanon in response to the attack in the north on that Christian village. He said, quote, "Since the Israeli enemy targeted all of Lebanon, we have the right from a defensive position to target any place," end quote. And then also on Tuesday, Netanyahu reiterated his opposition to a ceasefire in Lebanon. He told Macron, who he met with, that Israel is, quote, "opposed to a unilateral ceasefire which does not change the security situation in Lebanon and which will only return it to the way it was," end quote. So since Israel dramatically escalated its bombing campaign in Lebanon on September 23rd, over 1,500 people have been killed by Israeli airstrikes, including many civilians. Over the past year, the death toll has reached 2,350 since October 2023. Also, a mass displacement crisis. About 1.2 million people have been displaced, including over 400,000 children. And the U.S. is backing this full-throated support. All right, so the next one here, NATO kicks off drills simulating nuclear war. This one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. NATO has kicked off its yearly war games that simulate a nuclear conflict with Russia. The Kremlin denounced the drills, which Moscow views as an annual provocation. On Monday, NATO began the war games dubbed Steadfast Noon, involving 13 countries, 2,000 troops, and dozens of aircraft. The warplanes include some that are capable of carrying nuclear warheads, such as the F-35. The Kremlin responded sharply to the drills. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, said, quote, "In the conditions of a hot war, which is going on within the framework of the Ukrainian conflict, such exercises lead to nothing but further escalation of tension," end quote. And, of course, he blamed the West for the heightened tensions. He said, quote, "Russia has never moved with its military infrastructure toward NATO. It has always been the other way around," end quote. Peskov went on to say that de-escalation is unlikely at any time in the near future, as the Kremlin is unwilling to talk with the U.S. given Washington's aggressive posture. Basically, he's saying it's impossible to talk to them about the issue of arms control. He said, quote, "In the context of the war that is being waged against Russia with the indirect and even direct involvement of nuclear powers such as the United States, Great Britain, and France, it is absolutely impossible to talk about this without linking the issue to all other aspects of security," end quote. And Russia did, a few months ago, Russia held nuclear drills that they said were in response to Western, threats from Western officials and provocations from the West. All right, so then the next one here, Russia says that it would give military aid to North Korea if it was attacked. So Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko said Tuesday that Russia would provide military assistance to North Korea if it comes under attack based on a treaty the two nations signed earlier this year. He told TASS, quote, "If an act of aggression is committed against the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, all necessary measures will be taken in accordance with our legislation, in accordance with the DPRK's legislation," end quote. So Putin and Kim, they signed a strategic partnership pact back in June. I think that was when I was in Australia. That was when Kim went to visit Russia, and they were driving around in a limousine, if you saw those pictures. And so they signed this pact, this treaty, and it includes a clause requiring the countries to come to each other's aid if one is attacked. According to Article 4 of the treaty, Russia and North Korea shall immediately provide military and other assistance if one falls into a state of war due to armed invasion from an individual or multiple states. The treaty stipulates the assistance will be provided in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter, which gives member states the right of individual or collective self-defense in the event of an attack. Rudenko said, quote, "The treaty is signed, so it is public. It has Article 4, which deals precisely with the issue of mutual assistance in case of aggression, that the sides, in the case of aggression against one of the sides, will provide each other with any necessary assistance, including military assistance," end quote. So this could just mean, military aid, shipping weapons, things like that. Or it could also, mean direct military intervention. It can be, it says that they'll have consultations and that they'll figure it out, kind of similar to Article 5 in NATO's treaty. So, there's a lot of ways it could go. And these comments come as tensions are really high on the Korean Peninsula. Since Biden has been president, things have just gone downhill there. And right now the North is threatening war with the South over drone flights near Pyongyang. And South Korea is saying that it's fully ready to face an attack from the North. And Rudenko's comments also come amid rumors that North Korean troops are fighting in Ukraine. So there's all these reports about North Korean troops in Ukraine, fighting in Ukraine, all these claims that they might send like 100,000 troops. From what I've seen, it's only claims from Ukraine, from Zelensky and Ukrainian intelligence officials. Russia has denied that North Korean troops are there. I haven't seen any evidence of it besides these Ukrainian claims, and it does seem like something useful for the Ukrainians to push to try to get more support from the West. I think it's possible because, if North Korea is giving weapons to Russia, that they might send some advisors, to help use those weapons. So I think that's possible, but I just haven't seen any evidence of like North Korean soldiers actually on the ground fighting. I mean, there's all these drones being used in this war, all this drone footage that comes out, but we haven't seen anything. So the next story here, family of U.S. citizen killed by the IDF demands justice. So this one is from The Guardian. So the shooting of Aishanur Ezgi Agi is still recent enough that her family slips into the present tense when they talk about her. Her husband, Hamid Ali, so she was married. She was 26. And they just celebrated their third wedding anniversary. And he said, quote, "It feels like she's just going to hop on a plane any day now and come back and tell us all about her travels and what she learned," end quote. The pain has only been made worse by fears that there will be impunity for those responsible for Agi's death. So this is her sister, I believe, who says, quote, "I think the trickiest part for me has been trying to grieve the death of my sister while also trying to push for justice. This is something the U.S. government, the Biden administration, should naturally be doing. I wouldn't wish this on any family," end quote. So Agi was shot in the head while attending a protest at a West Bank village in Beta against Israeli settlements. All the evidence shows that, an Israeli sniper shot her in the head while they were like 200 yards away or very far away. She was no threat. There was nothing happening, nothing going on. There was a confrontation between the troops and the protesters at one point, but that was over for a while. And then she gets shot in the head while she's standing in an olive grove where she ran to when the soldiers were firing tear gas and things at the protesters. So deliberate shot in the head. Biden has basically bought into the whole Israeli narrative that it was an accident, and the U.S. is not doing its own investigation. They're saying, oh, Israel, has got to investigate it. It's a complete joke. So that is it for the news for today. So go check out our viewpoints. One from Ramzi Baroud on the murder of my sister and Israel's war on hope. So this is Ramzi's column about his sister, Dr. Soma Baroud, who was killed in Khan Yunis. And she was a doctor. She worked at a hospital throughout this whole past year. And she was killed by the IDF while she was in a taxi. One from Ted Snyder, Ukraine could lose territory and its dreams of NATO. One from Mitchell Plitnick, the United States and Israel set out to remake the Middle East again. One from Gideon Levy, why is it that we must respond to the Iranian attack? And the spotlight is from Aaron Mate, Netanyahu's endless war for regional supremacy. So please go check all of that out. Again, if you could help us out with our fundraiser, antiwar.com/donate for that. Other ways you could help us out, support us, share this show, tell your friends about antiwar.com, like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.